Hey there, it's Bill here, and this is the Recovery After Stroke podcast where stroke survivors come to find hope, practical strategies, and real life stories from people who truly get it. Before we jump in, a big thank you to you and to my Patreon supporters. You've been helping me cover the cost of hosting after more than 10 years of me doing it solo, so we can keep this podcast going for survivors who need support and a pathway forward. And thank you to everyone who leaves a comment on YouTube, reviews the show on Spotify and Apple, and buys my book. And to the viewers who don't skip the ads, I see you, I appreciate you. Today's guest is Ken Kerns, and Ken's story is a powerful one. He survived an AVM brain hemorrhage, underwent surgery, and spent 10 days in a medically induced coma. He woke up with right side paralysis and aphasia, and over time he rebuilt his speech, his confidence, and his independence. And stay with us because later in the episode, Ken shares a simple tool that helped him walk more safely with foot drop, a pair of shoes that he says helped him stop falling and even reduced his need for an AFO. It's a practical new way to walk, but this episode is about so much more than just the shoes. Ken Kerns, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. I'm happy to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Give me a bit of an idea of what life was like before stroke. What were you up to back then? What you're working towards?
Before my stroke, I was a university administrator, and I was in charge of the research, safety, and occupational health at University of Arizona. Before that, I was an assistant vice president at University of Minnesota, and before that, Tulane University, and before that, Iowa State University. So I had about 70 people that reported to me in two different departments. And every morning I would get up and at 5 o'clock, and my wife and I would walk our dogs. We lived in Tucson, Arizona, so the mornings were always nice. And you know, I I was hired to make changes, and I was looking at where more efficiency could lie in our departments. So yeah, it was a high pressure job, and I liked doing it, and I liked all the people. I yeah.
And what about family life? How busy was it at home?
Well, I have two daughters, and they're both married, and they they lived. My daughter, my youngest daughter, lived in Phoenix. We were in Tucson, Arizona, and so we were about an hour away. And my oldest daughter at the time was living in Iowa, and she was um, assistant coaching for women's soccer at Iowa State University. And um, and when they were young, I was very involved in their athletics and academics. Um, and now uh, they each have. My oldest daughter lives here in the Minneapolis area, about an hour away from us, and she has twin daughters that are 3 years old. And so, luckily, we get to see them all the time. And my youngest daughter lives in Baltimore, and um, and she has a, a little. She has a girl, a 2-year-old girl, and so I'm the grandfather of three granddaughters, and I have two daughters, and they're both married to women, and I have a wife. So I tell people I swim in a sea of estrogen, and
You you certainly do, my friend, and you're doing a great job. And
yes.
I just love that. Uh, you're a granddad now. The little ones are all kind of the same age, and it will
Yes,
be a chaotic uh, experience at your house should everybody be together at the same time.
yes, yes. And um, about once a year, we could all be together. But I see my daughter with the twins on a routine basis, and we try to fly to Baltimore twice or every 2 months. And luckily for FaceTime, we're able to FaceTime our granddaughter in Baltimore. Her name is Emerson, and watch her grow and see the milestones. So yeah, and my daughter moved from Phoenix to Baltimore, Maryland, because she is a veterinarian and she is doing a 3 year dentistry residency, and so she's finishing up her third year now.
Ah, wow. She's a
Yeah.
veterinarian already, and she's going to change direction.
Well, she will be a veterinary dentist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Very small community. I understand there's only about roughly 200 veterinary dentists in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a specialty.
Yes.
Did you have a sense of your health before the stroke? Did you have an idea of how you kind of felt about your body, whether there was any um, undiagnosed or diagnosed health challenges before the stroke?
No. Actually, I was in pretty good health. I I tried to average about 18,000 steps a day, and we did that through walking in the morning. And then when I would have one-on-one meetings with my staff, we would go walk around the campus, and I'd ask them to show me new places. And you know, when it's 104 degrees outside and I'm in a suit, uh, it could become very taxing, so to say. But I it was my routine, and yeah, I had no at the time I had no symptoms and no indications. But in retrospect, I we had family portraits taken a year before my stroke, and I noticed that I had big veins popping out of my head, and sometimes when I exerted myself, I would hear my heartbeat in my ear, and I've learned since then that those are both signs of an AVM, an arterial venous malformation.
They're not
And
signs of an AVM, are they? We'll be back with more of Ken's remarkable story in just a moment. Up to this point, you've heard how suddenly life can change. Ken's AVM hemorrhage, the fear and the uncertainty in the hospital, and what it's like to wake up and face recovery when your speech and movement aren't cooperating. In a moment, Ken shares what helped him rebuild communication, confidence with aphasia, and yes, he'll also get into that walking breakthrough, the shoes he's been using for foot drop, and he says helped him avoid falls, and walk more naturally. If you've been searching for AFO alternatives or ways to feel safer on stairs and uneven ground, you'll want to hear that part. If you're listening and you feel like recovery is heavy right now, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. If you'd like to support the podcast and help keep it going, you can check out my Patreon at patreon.com/recovery after stroke. It genuinely helps. All right, let's get back to Ken.
well, I've read that some people could hear their heartbeat in their ear, if they have an AVM. But I I just thought that that was a sign of aging, and especially the veins.
Wow.
But yeah, and so I'm I'm I went to a stroke conference recently for Minnesota, and I met with the organizers, and I we talked about you know whether I would whether I would be able to get access to the database so that I could send out a questionnaire, especially for those who have had AVMs, and and ask them the questions about protruding veins and hearing your pulse in your ear.
Golly gosh. I think I'm going to ask around as well. So I had an AVM that burst. I never had any sense of hearing my heartbeat or anything like that in my ear, and I never had any sense of any protruding blood vessels any differently from previous any previous sort of idea of blood vessels protruding or anything like that. So that's the first I've heard of that. That's fascinating and interesting to know. You, what was it like on the day that you experienced the hemorrhage? Where were you?
I was at home. This was at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and so we we sent all our staff and faculty home, and I was getting ready for a meeting with my occupational health staff, and my I went to the bathroom, and my wife came to get me because it was close, and she knocked on the door, and I had passed out, and I I was in the water closet, and I fell between next to the door, so she couldn't open the door, and but she could hear me breathing heavily, and so she called emergency services, and they sent a fire truck out, and and I was not aware of any of that. My I don't I have no recollection of anything that happened, and I had to rely on my wife for that. And and I the doctor, the neurosurgeon looked at my MRI, and he thought there was a tumor because my history, I had a kidney cancer in 2007, and they removed my left kidney. And so he thought maybe that it metastasized and went to my brain, and he didn't recognize it as an AVM until he did the surgery. And beforehand, you know, my this was at the start of the pandemic, and my wife Carrie could not be with me. They allowed her into the emergency room so she could say goodbye to me because they weren't sure that I would survive, the surgery. And the doctor, the neurosurgeon, talked to my wife, and and she had the girls on the phone, and he said that if it is a tumor, then I I probably would have to undergo chemo or radiation treatments, and if not, he wasn't sure I would survive. And but he also said that he could tell where the tumor is, that I would probably never speak again either. And
Well, he was wrong about that.
yeah, um, but he was looking at it like a tumor. Once he got in, he saw that it was an AVM, and he removed the AVM, and and I was in a medically induced coma for 10 days.
Hmm.
And during that time, I lived an alternate life. I I had these very vivid coma dreams, and um, they they were so real to me that I couldn't distinguish between what was happening and when I finally when they took me out of my coma. It was that real.
So you woke up with deficits, aphasia being one of them, because
Yeah.
your your T-shirt suggests that you experienced aphasia, but
Yeah.
aphasia can't stop you from being awesome. So that's awesome. I'm glad it didn't do that, amongst other things. Then and also some, is it right side deficits there, Ken? What
Yes.
deficits do you have physically?
When I came out of my coma, I was paralyzed on my right side. I couldn't move my arm. My it was all just lifeless, and I couldn't talk, and I had to learn to swallow again. So and slowly, I I was able to say a few words, and all the time I thought I was being very coherent, and and I thought I was having real conversations, and it turns out that um, I I wasn't I wasn't as articulate as I thought I was.
Yeah. Your conversation now is quite good, and it's a little slow, and there's a number of stages for you to get the word out. So, what does it feel like to try and talk now and have a conversation? And I imagine it's very different from what it was at the beginning, because if you couldn't talk then and you couldn't swallow, and now you're definitely doing both, there's quite a
Yeah.
contrast. So, what does it feel like to put words together now and make a sentence?
Sometimes it's very frustrating, especially when I can't articulate with all the emotion and feeling. If I get really excited about a topic, if I watch a football game and I want to explain a play that I saw, I have a hard time trying to convey that. So, and I I am I joined a group in Minnesota called Minnesota Connect Aphasia Now, MinCan, and it is a communication group. So once a week, we we talk to we get together, and it's led by a speech language pathologist, and we just communicate. We talk, and that's given me a lot more confidence in speaking because before I joined the communication group, I would rely on my wife to order food for me, at a restaurant or check in at an airport, because even simple questions would cause me anxiety. But now I've been doing that for um, 3 years, and it's helped me a lot. And
S-
I I joined their board. I'm on the board of directors for
Of
MinCan.
course. Of course you are. Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, and I'm actually the president of the board.
Of course. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. That I've known you for a few minutes, but already that doesn't surprise me. So, you go from being a very busy man at a university, 70 people reporting to you. It's what you do. You manage
Yeah,
organizations at this high level, and then you're at home with plenty of time on your hands. But you figure, oh well, I may as well combine my desire to speak again and get better at that with helping in another way, with running, a part of the organization or a particular role, playing a particular role. I love it. Um, that's the thing about a lot of the stroke survivors that I come across. Many of them will find a way to help, like make a difference. How can I help now that this thing has happened to me and I have a different perspective? And you would never have imagined that you would have been part of a board that was helping people learn how to speak again.
yeah, yeah. I I I I I think the first time I realized that I wasn't speaking as well as I thought I was when I was released from an inpatient rehab facility where I got daily physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. My wife and my eldest daughter, who is a physical therapist, she they both came to the rehab center, and that's the first time that I had seen them since my stroke, and it was months. But we talked to each of the therapists, and with my speech therapist, she showed me, or she showed my wife a picture that she had asked me questions about, and I'm sure you saw it. It's a very common picture for speech therapists. It was of a mother who was doing dishes, had her back to the kids, and the water was overflowing. The kids were climbing up on a bench trying to get some cookies, and and I thought I explained it in that type of detail. But the speech therapist said that she wrote down what I said, and it was bad mom, bad kids. And it floored me that because I thought I was I was really describing in great detail.
More articulate than that. But that was a decent effort because even though perhaps the mum wasn't being bad and the kids weren't being bad, the scene, you did describe a potential version of what you saw in the scene. And it was short and sweet and succinct. Bad mum, bad kids, maybe.
Yeah,
Um, it's a scene. You can interpret it how you like. That's not what's important here. But you were succinct at how you got the message across. And that would have given people a lot of information about where your speech was and how you were articulating and creating words, etc. Did you, what is it like, Ken, to wake up after a stroke and realize that you have all these challenges that are associated to the deficits, including your right side not working and your speech not working? Your Before that, you were a school, you were at a university, you played a big role there. You walked around the place for meetings. You did 18,000 steps. What's it like to experience that contrast at the very beginning? How do you wrap your head around it?
well, I initially I was confused because and I was even more confused um, because um, I wrote a book and its title is Anything But Frank. And the reason for that was as soon as I woke up from the coma, there was a male nurse who came into my room and he kept calling me Frank. And my name is Ken. And so I had an identity crisis. And he kept saying, Frank, how are you doing? I'm here to pull your tube out, Frank. Blow, 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 Frank. And then he said the scariest thing of all. Tonight you'll be able to FaceTime with your wife, Frank. And so inside I thought, oh my gosh, did I die and come back as Frank? And who am I going to FaceTime with? Is it going to be my wife, Carrie, or Frank's wife? And if it is Frank's wife, would I recognize her and would I like her? And, so I, even though I was very fatigued, I, I fretted about that all day long and I couldn't sleep because I was worried about, who I was. And then when nurse came in and turned the iPad around, she said, someone's here to see you. And I saw that it was my wife, Carrie, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Yeah, and I was so relieved. I couldn't speak, and I just started to bawl. And my wife kept trying to comfort me because she was thinking that I was sad or upset, but those were tears of relief and of joy. And yeah,
Yeah, I
so
bet. Imagine that, having the physical identity crisis and then the auditory identity crisis, and then somebody else gives you a different name. That
yeah,
would be challenging. Like, I can understand how you would link those and go, who am I? Like, how have I become Frank uh, all of a sudden? Now, did this particular nurse just get it wrong? They just made a mistake on, they didn't read your chart properly? What?
I don't know, but I know that at the time, um, the hospitals were overcrowding and the nursing staff, they were overtaxed.
Yeah,
And so I think that it was just that they misread something, whether it was a chart and or if they just glanced at it. Um, so I don't know. And
yeah.
yeah, but
Uh,
I shared that story with my brothers and sisters because we would set up Zoom calls after my stroke, um, a monthly Zoom call, and I shared that story with them. And like good brothers and sisters do, they started to call me Frank, and I said, "Call me anything but Frank." And so they called me anything but Frank. Yeah, and so that's why I chose the title of the book. That for the title of the book.
Do you happen to have a copy of the book with you there?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the book. What's there? It is Anything But Frank, Kenneth Kerns. Um, a journey of healing, patience, and rediscovery.
Yes. Um, I I didn't set out to write a book, um, but when I went to outpatient um, therapy, my speech therapist, um, we were talking, and I talked about my dreams, and I found out afterwards that my wife had actually talked to the speech therapist beforehand, and she recommended that I write about my dreams because she knew that I was goal driven. And if I had a goal, I would work at it. And at the time, my right hand wasn't working, I and so I could only type with my left hand, which meant that I had to use one finger at a time, hunt and peck. But I wrote about my dreams And then my speech therapist said, Ken, if you fill it in with other stories about your recovery, that could be a very helpful book for anyone who has gone through strokes or for their care partners.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea to capture what you can, and it's a good rehabilitation task as well, writing
Yes.
and creating a book. Was it difficult? Did you have fatigue kick in? Any challenges writing it, other than the
Um,
usual challenges that people experience writing a book?
well, I slept a lot um, during my first year after stroke, and um, I would go to therapy. Um, I think 2 or 3 times a week, and my wife would have to drive me, and I'd come home and just be wiped out. Because I was working on walking again and using my right hand and um, and speaking. So, um, but I I my challenges were really that I couldn't type very well um, using one finger, and my wife said, "Why don't you use speech to text?" And I just looked at her like, "Are you kidding?" And yeah, she got it. Um, but it would have been a good thing to use at that time if I could speak fluently and could articulate all the nuances that that I have in the book.
Yeah,
So
it's great rehabilitation writing a book. I'm curious about. I've never asked this of somebody who is living with aphasia. Does your brain go faster than your mouth, or do they go at the same pace?
I my brain works much faster than my mouth.
Ah,
Yeah, because I have my full cognition, and it's I tell people that there used to be a direct path between my brain and my mouth, and now that path is worn. It's covered by weeds, and so
ah,
I have to meander about to find the words, and sometimes it gets lost. But I could take in everything and think about. I could formulate answers in my head, but it's sometimes difficult to get the words out.
yeah. You know that path that's covered by weeds. That's an interesting representation, analogy, if you may, if I may, of the path to your mouth, to the words, like covered by weeds. Are they tall weeds? Are they short weeds? Like what kind of weeds are they?
Um, some days it's it's a little more clear, especially if I'm talking about someone in a casual way, and it's about something that I've rehearsed. It's not there, and other times it's very tall weeds, and I have to meander about and to try to find the way down. Um, and
Do you have a
you know,
way? I'm curious. Do you? Let's play a game. Do you have a way to easily make the weeds separate? You know, like maybe like a Moses kind of separating the sea to allow people to walk through. Like, is there like a special thing that would be great if you had to just kind of make the weeds move out of the way and allow you to pass a little bit easier?
um, I think the only thing that I could do is pause and think about what I want to say.
Yeah.
Um, but that's that's not always possible, especially in a group conversation.
Yeah.
Because if I pause, people would think that that's their invitation to speak over me,
Yeah.
and yeah,
If you,
so,
what I was asking, I get that, but let's play with this analogy. I'm just curious about this analogy. Say if you were in your backyard of your house, and the weeds were that long, you'd be dressed in some kind of. Your wife wouldn't allow it, but say that they got out of the weeds got long, and then you had the opportunity to go in there and tend to the yard and get the weeds sorted. Which tool would you use to make a path between the front and the back of the house? How would you get the weeds out of your way so that you could make that path easier?
well, if you're talking about actual weeds, I
Yeah,
would use a weed whacker or a scythe or you know my power mower.
yeah,
Um, but it's difficult for me to take those tools, those um, theoretical tools, and
yeah.
clear a pathway to my mouth. So,
Because,
um, because my that part of the brain was damaged,
uh-huh,
and and it the brain is very resilient, and so it forms new pathways.
yeah.
And so the only thing that I think I could do is practice, and and you know I've I gave a keynote speech a couple years ago at our big fundraiser for MinCan,
Mm,
and I had to practice that speech over and over and over so that it became rote.
yeah.
And that's the only thing, you know.
If
But
the weeds were if the weeds were less tall, that might help as well, though.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe they could be tall. Maybe we can make the weeds a little less tall, just to kind of make the path more obvious, even though there's a little bit of damage there. So that you can find the path around and create new connections to the new path. And then as you go to continue talking, moving forward into the future, you're just noticing that, oh, the weeds are a little bit shorter and I can go around
Yeah,
the damaged part and I can see a new path. And then even though it's a path that hasn't been well traveled yet, it will eventually connect up and it'll be a little quicker and there'll be less need for pauses later on though down the track, and there may even be less need for rote learning. It might just kind of become a different style of learning, that next level learning. What is that actually? If you're not doing rote learning when you're speaking, what's the next level of learning? Is there one?
um, well, I think just the fact that I'm participating in the communication groups where we we never know what questions are going to be asked,
Yeah,
and that helps a lot. And it's interesting because my wife, when she comes home from work, she could ask me, "What's another word for this?" And I could come up with 10 different words.
yeah,
But it's hard for me to convey um, messages. You know, um, it's hard for me to talk about things that I've experienced, and I can't get the experience to come out in words that are adequate.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It completely makes sense. I mean, pathways change in the brain. The retraining is a skill and a task, and it takes time, and things happen. And then there are either metaphorical obstacles. For some people, there are mindset obstacles. For some people, there are emotional obstacles. There's a number of obstacles. And then I suppose the thing about this conversation, which is great, is that you seem to get to the obstacle and you seem to find a way around it. It seems to be okay for you to get there, even though perhaps it might be frustrating for a moment or at that time. But it seems like the recovery has continued to happen and you have more and more fluent speech now than you've had previously, and that sort of seems to continue to improve. Is that what you've noticed about your speech?
Yes, yes, um, and other people have mentioned that, if if I didn't tell them I had aphasia, that they they wouldn't know that I had difficulty speaking.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, um, and there are some members of our group that have very severe aphasia, and and others who have moderate to mild aphasia, and that's where I would classify myself.
Yeah, understand. Other than
But
the aphasia, whoop, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, I when I first came out of my coma, I had severe aphasia,
Yeah,
and it's improved with time and practice.
yeah, yep. And I love that you put yourself in challenging situations where speech is necessary, a boardroom, and all the different other places that you find yourself. That would help in recovery, I think. It would really help make things um, get more practice in different environments at least, and give you opportunities to learn how to regulate your excitement or your emotions or whatever it is that sometimes you need to overcome to get to that word to come out properly. It gives you lots of practice in that space. Um, other than other than the aphasia, Ken, I was curious about the other little challenges or big challenges that you've had to overcome, like walking again and using your right side. So, where are you at with the physical part of the recovery?
Um, well, I my right side, I have about 70% of my mobility and strength compared to my left, but it doesn't stop me from from typing or cooking. I cook every night, and I use a knife masterfully, and I haven't lost any fingers yet.
Good.
Um, and but I don't have the strength on my right side. You
Uh-huh.
know, I I like to get down on the floor with my granddaughters, and it's difficult for me to get down gracefully, and it's harder for me to get up because I don't have the strength in my arms and legs. And my right leg, from the knee down, I have no movement, no control. So I can't move my ankle at all. And so I wasn't driving for about 3 years. And then I mentioned to my neurologist once I moved to Minnesota that I missed driving. And he said, well, why don't I send you to occupational health and they will do an evaluation? So I passed, all the tests that they do, but I still couldn't use my right foot. And they let me test drive a car that had a left foot accelerator installed. And so I was able to use that. And now our vehicles have a left foot accelerator. It's a third pedal that goes on the left hand side, and to activate it, you just push a button. So if I'm driving, I have to push a button. If anyone else is driving that vehicle, they just turn it on and it works the other way. And it
Yeah.
disables the right accelerator. And I just had to learn to reflexively use my right foot or my left foot to use the brake and gas the
Yeah.
accelerator.
That that's a
Yeah.
great little solution there. That improves your independence and gives you the opportunity to be out and about at your own time in your own way. That's excellent.
Yeah, and I I suffer from a condition called drop foot,
Yes.
and and I used to have several falls, just from not being able to lift my foot. I would fall on stairs and fall walking across the room, and I was fitted with an ankle foot orthotic, and that improved it. And lately, I my daughter, who is a physical therapist, sent me an advertisement for a new pair of shoes. And since I've been wearing them, I haven't fallen. Um, they're made by Cadence, and the they have um, the outside. Let me take it off so I could show you.
Yeah. This is not going to help the people listening to the podcast, but it will help the people watching.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So these these are very slick, and so um, when you're walking, they slide, and
Ah.
and the middle, when you put weight on it, it has a lot of traction.
Ah.
So
So your foot doesn't grab when you slide it, and it
yeah,
has traction when you put weight on it.
put weight. Yeah,
Yeah, can you turn it to the other direction, Ken? Just so I can see. Okay, so they look like a normal shoe,
yeah,
but when you flip it underneath, it's all in the sole.
yeah, yeah,
Wow, what an
and
amazing thing.
yeah, and I haven't had any falls since I started wearing them.
And they're by an organization called Cadence, are they?
Yeah, Cadense.
Cadence shoes. Truly adaptive shoes. Here we go. Cadence.com.
Yep.
And they give you a 10% discount immediately. Yeah, they offer you a 10% discount if you go to the website. I'll decline the discount. And then when I look at the website, I wonder if I share my screen. Why don't I share my screen?
Okay.
Screen. Share screen. That one there. Share. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Look at that. It shows exactly how the shoe works. It slides at the front there, and then it has grips, and it has a number of different styles. There's slippers.
Yes.
There's what we would call joggers or running shoes or runners in Australia. How it works. Made for people who struggle with foot dragging. There you go. If you or someone you love finds it hard to lift the front of the foot or often trips while walking, Cadence shoes may help make movement smoother. They glide as you walk and gently grip when weight shifts to the front, helping each step feel more natural. Now, this is not an ad for this organization, but I love sharing information that's helpful to people, especially when it's such a simple tool. This is
Yeah.
brilliant. So I love that you've shared that and you showed us the shoe. Now people got to have a look at the website. I'll stop sharing that. And have I stopped sharing? Are we done?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great. So now people have a bit of a reference as to another tool that can solve a problem. And
Right.
how much difference does it make to your walking?
Um, I I use them all the time. I have uh, several sets. Some I use only outdoors, and this pair is my indoor shoes. And since I've started wearing them, I haven't had any falls. And
Well, that is so
so
good.
yeah, yeah,
And, and I imagine at the same time, because of that, you're not wearing an AFO. Is that right?
yes, that's correct. Yeah, I I don't have to wear my AFO, and um, in Minnesota we get a lot of snow and ice, and I could walk out on the ice and I don't fall.
Wow, man.
So
That is
the traction
amazing.
is that good.
And the fact
Yeah,
that you're not wearing an AFO means that you miss out on all of those AFO challenges that AFOs create, even though they try and solve a problem, they also cause a few problems. And
yeah,
also, you're walking, which means you get more opportunity to rehabilitate your leg in the more correct fashion.
yes, yes. And I'm now able to go up and down steps more naturally. And these actually help me going down steps because my foot used to slide off the front of the step, and now it grips when I put pressure on it, so I could go down the steps naturally.
Wow. I just love that. That is fantastic. Such a great solution, and it's such an easy solution. And it's a shoe instead of a attachment or any other kind of
Yeah,
cumbersome or bulky item. I'm glad we had a discussion about that. That's excellent, Ken. Thanks for sharing that. Um,
yeah,
the you're very upbeat. You're very. I'm going to solve all the problems. I'm going to find all the solutions. I'm going to get involved with organizations and participate and help out where I can. I have a feeling though there may have been some kind of difficult times as well. There's some difficult emotional states and mental states. Are you the kind of person who went through that type of thing? How do you bounce back from that type of thing if you
Um,
went through it?
well, when I on my second day at the rehab facility, I had just come out of my coma, and I was very angry at God that He would do this to me. And then I slept on it, and the next day I woke up with the mindset, God, you must have done this for a purpose. Tell me what your purpose is. And that's how I live every day now. I wake up and I ask God to guide my day, and and I'm a strong believer, and um, it's he hasn't let me down yet, and he's actually changed my heart. I've become more accepting of other people, um, more helpful. I'm more generous. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, and I my at first my mood swings were very volatile. I wouldn't get angry anymore, but I would get sad. And now I'm I'm uh, pretty level with my
Yeah.
mood, and it's always very good.
Yeah, great. Uh, you know that thing about getting angry with God? Lots of people say that. And I've never asked this question either. Is like, what do you think that is? Is that ego? Like, why could you, is it like, how could you do this to me? Do you know who I am? Is it, do you know how there's some people who kind of confuse what happened to them as being a personal attack when it's not? It's just life. When you are driving down the road and somebody didn't see you in their side mirror and change lanes, it wasn't a personal attack. It was just a road incident that ended benignly, that nothing happened. They didn't see you, they changed lanes, you saw them, you took the right action, you stopped. But sometimes some of us might go through that was a personal attack on me. And often with stroke, I hear people were angry at God. Either they remained angry or they were angry at the beginning. I've never asked, was it an ego thing? What was it?
Um, I don't think it was an ego thing because at the time, um, I I think I was just more confused, you know, and I was angry at the situation and I took it out on God.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Get it.
and um, but I know that God doesn't cause us to have strokes, but He does help us manage and live beyond our stroke.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I agree with that. I agree with that. I can relate to that. And I never got angry at God, but it did change it did change how I saw God. Previously, I thought God was a external thing that you outsource things to, that you can't access particularly well. And I just felt like that's how the teachings that I received going to church as a young kid, and the teachings that I received, by the way, were at a Greek Orthodox church where they spoke ancient Greek, where you don't really get a grasp of the scripture or the liturgy. It's more how it's translated by my parents, for example, or my teachers. And what I had a sense was that God was an external thing. When I internalized God, then I realized that I am God. I'm not God, but I am God. Like God is me, and it's
yeah,
it's a experience that I have within me rather than one that's out there that I have to um, ask for guidance and forgiveness and support and all those things, and then hope that I get it. When it's internalized, it's more about connecting to our Creator Spirit, whatever the word is that people have for God. That's not the word God. And then I realized that, oh, that's me. When I ask for those, for that path, for the guidance, for the support, for the courage, I'm not actually asking uh, this thing that I can't access. It's me. It's within me. It's my other than conscious mind. It's my subconscious mind, perhaps. And then that prompt, can I have some guidance? Would you be able to guide me? Allows me to receive that guidance and allows me to take aim in another direction, perhaps. Does that make sense?
yeah. I would refer to it as opening up your heart.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I prayed for. That God would open my heart and let me. I let me do the things that He meant for me to do.
I would
And
relate
so,
to opening of the heart because I said that I connected to my heart after my head went offline for the first time because my head was
yeah,
properly offline for months and years because of the blood that accumulated in my head before the brain surgery. I had two bleeds, and as a result of that, there was a massive blood clot in my head for almost 2 years, and my brain wouldn't work properly. I couldn't access a lot of it. So my heart kind of came online at that stage. And I noticed this strange sensation in my chest, which was my heart, which I hadn't really noticed so vividly before. And I describe it as having connected to my heart then. Now, it's not that I never had access, Ken, to being emotionally supportive or loving or any of that. I did, but it came online in another way, like a way more uh, volume, perhaps, or way more. The frequency was better or different or more.
Yeah. Um, well, I think the one thing that I noticed is um, I don't let little things bother me, and I appreciate um, the beauty that we have around us. I look at the changing leaves, and I appreciate God's creation, and I look at the snow when it's 2 feet high, and I see the beauty in it, and I also see the beauty in friends, family, and strangers. So yeah, it's I know um, your book um, uh, the unexpected uh, things that
The
the
unexpected way that a stroke
right.
became the best thing that happened.
Yes, yes, and um, I'm interested in reading it to see, you know, because I think that could have been a title for my book too.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
So what you're describing is, uh, and I didn't have words for it either, is both you and I had a post-traumatic growth um, occur, and I'm going to read what they are, what the domains of post-traumatic growth are, and see how you relate to them. Uh, so there are two researchers, Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, who researched that strange happening after a terrible traumatic incident, whether it's a health one or a family one or um, some other kind of traumatic experience that people have. And then there's those strange people who say that was the best thing that happened to me. Of course, they're not talking about the acute phase. For example, I wasn't talking about my stroke when I was in it, when I was um, not sure if I would survive or not uncertain about the future. Like in that moment, it wasn't the best thing that happened to me. Um, it was later on in reflection, many, many years down the track, say 4 or 5 years later, when I looked back and saw what I'd overcome, how far I had come, how I had changed, I was very uh, comfortable in saying that the growth that I had had because of my stroke experience was more growth in those few years than I'd ever had in the 37 years before my stroke. And it was like profound. You could see it. You could notice it in my life everywhere. My family would notice, people I hadn't seen for a long time would notice how people were responding to me was very different. The kind of tasks I was involved in were very different. I was helping in the community, which was something I'd never done before. All these amazing things. So the 5 domains that I related to uh, were a greater appreciation for life. That's the first one. My relationships with others strengthened as a result of me making the decision to do that. Increased personal strength. I discovered that I had this resilience that I never thought possible previously, which was, that type of resilience that people say, oh, if I was in your shoes, I don't know if I would be able to do what you're doing. I discovered that
Yeah.
I had that type of resilience. And then I discovered new possibilities, becoming a podcaster, becoming a speaker, becoming somebody who wrote a book. All these new possibilities that came into my world that never existed before. And then I did have a spiritual or existential change, some kind of deeper understanding of spirit or God and how I related to that and connected. And they're the 5 domains. And what I found was in my book, there was 10 things that people had in common that allowed them to get to that stage of becoming somebody who could say that stroke was the best thing that happened to them. And those 10 things included their mindset was really about stroke recovery. How am I going to overcome this? They adopted a recovery mindset. Um, there's a chapter about the heart brain. So they connected to their heart and discovered their heart, were able to be more connected to it. They took really gutsy action. They had the courage to step forward in the face of the challenge and find solutions and overcome what was stopping them. They made a reference to neuroplasticity, like positive neuroplasticity, because there is a side of neuroplasticity that if you have a negative mindset, if you don't take action to improve your gait and your walking, that neuroplasticity kicks in, but in a negative way. Um, they improved their sleep, or they realized they needed to sleep more often or not use their phone during bedtime, something along those lines. They improved
Yep.
their diet. They changed what they ate or what they consumed. For me, it was smoking, drinking, uh, and certain carbohydrates. They were attempting to be as active as they possibly could be, even with their deficits. So they became physical. Uh, they started living heartfully. So they started to live a heartfelt kind of direction in their life. So they decided that they would um, kind of guide their life by what felt right for their heart, what their heart desired. Uh, they built a supportive community. They rallied around each other. They found people who were similar, who were going through similar things, and they used that to help learn and get some understanding of each other. And then, and many of them, and same as I, um, found our purpose and meaning. But that's not what they set out to do. It kind of came at the end. And I
Yeah.
remember Ken being on a podcast about episode 40 or 42 or something like that. And then saying to the person I was interviewing, I think that stroke is the best thing that happened to me, and having this conversation about purpose and meaning, which I stumbled across. And that was very much linked to helping other people, finding a purpose and meaning in life that was beyond just my children and my wife, which is an amazing purpose and meaning, by the way. But it was kind of expanded. And I and the reason for the title of my book, why it's so long, is because I didn't have a word like post traumatic growth. And then, as I almost finished writing my book, I found the study that Tedeschi and Calhoun had done, and they coined the term post traumatic growth. And now that I have that term, I can very succinctly say to people the reason I'm this guy who I am now is because I experienced post traumatic growth. And now I love telling people about it because they might be in the moment going through this appreciation for life, improving their relationships, um, increasing their personal strength, finding the strength within them. They might be finding new possibilities and having this spiritual growth and not realize that there's a word for it and not have a way to describe it to people. And that's kind of
Yeah.
what we have now. We have this beautiful um, little succinct sentence, post-traumatic growth. And it's not the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder, by the way. It, it
Yeah.
lives in the moments between post-traumatic stress difficulties, episodes, because people who are on a post-traumatic stress disorder growth phase, they are experiencing these changes as well. And again, my goal has become just to let people know, to make them aware that even in the mess, there's some good moments.
Yeah. Um, I I think I could relate to most of the things that you um, articulated. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's just interesting that we find the similarities in people from cultures all around the world. And I interviewed people in America when I researched this book. It took me a couple of years because I was dealing with stroke as well. It took me a couple of years to research the book and then a couple of years to actually write it and get it out. But yeah, that's what it tells the story of. And what I'm hoping is that somebody who reads my book, they've done, say, uh, maybe they've got 5 of those 10 things that they're
yeah,
already doing, and they want to take it to the next level, and they just want a little more guidance. Okay, what do I do next? Perhaps they haven't attended to their sleep yet, or perhaps they haven't changed what they're consuming yet, that kind of stuff. And when I talk
yeah,
about consuming, I don't know about you, but I'm also talking about what they consume on television, on the radio, what they listen to in podcasts, that
yeah,
kind of stuff. Because that consumption can also have a negative impact, especially if you get sucked into politics, which many of us can get sucked
yeah.
into.
Well, I don't watch television at all um, until my wife comes home, and
Yep.
then we watch what she wants, and um, and I don't follow the news very closely because
Yeah.
I find it depressing,
Yep.
and I don't need that poison in my life. Yeah,
I'm
and
with you
so,
100%.
but I do listen to music. I when I when I was at before my stroke, if I had a big paper due, I would go in my office, kick off my shoes, and crank up the music really loud, and that's how I would get my creative juices flowing. And I could I could write very good reports and requests by doing that. Now I have to have the music lower, because if it's too loud, it causes me anxiety,
Yeah.
and um, and I I I I especially have a hard time when um, I'm watching shows where people are yelling at each other.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but and because I tried to avoid conflict anymore. Um, Before, being at a university, um, you would invite conflict. You would you would invite verbal confronta- confron- confrontations. Um, just so that you could uh, share ideas. And now I try to avoid any type of conflict.
Yeah. I understand that. It's very energetically taxing, and it takes a long time to overcome for me. That's what I find when I get emotional, if I'm having an argument or something like that, it has a way bigger impact than it used to, and
Yeah,
I'm more aware of it now. Well, actually, it probably has the same type of impact, but I'm more aware of it now, and I realize that it's not the right way to go. There's better ways. Um, some conflict is important. Maybe like on a major on a scale, conflict when you have some needs that haven't been met by a particular organization and you need to get your point across. And I'm not talking about yelling and screaming. I'm talking about just being able to still uh, ensure your needs are being met and whatever you need to do that. But that's a different kind of thing. It's not conflict for the sake of conflict. It's for the sake of
right.
getting something sorted, perhaps. Look, thank you so much for joining me, reaching out and being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing the amazing things that you shared, as well as those brilliant shoes that help with foot drop.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time. And you're a great example of how to go about recovery after stroke. And Merry Christmas. And I hope that 2026 is prosperous and healthy.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate you inviting me to the podcast, and I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you so much. And with regards to your book, we're going to have the links on the show notes, but where can people find it?
You could get it on Amazon or Archway Publishing. That is my publisher, and you could buy it directly from them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I will have the links in the show notes, in the YouTube description, everywhere where we can put it. Thanks again, Ken. I'd like to thank Ken for sharing his story so honestly, especially the reality of aphasia, the mindset shifts after trauma, and the practical solutions he found to keep moving forward. For everyone listening, if you want to connect with Ken and check out his book, Anything But Frank, we'll put the links in the show notes and the YouTube description. And if today's conversation helped you, please do 3 things. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, tell me what part of Ken's story you related to most. Share this episode with someone who needs hope and a real path forward. And you can also check out my book at recoveryafterstroke.com/book and support the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Thanks for being here. And remember, you're not alone in this recovery journey.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamas. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.